Morning, everybody. My name is Susan Licata. You can see my thumbnail photo there. And I want to welcome you to Census Bureau's presentation of resources for the media. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully, we'll be able to see this. All right. Are you able to see my screen, my slide deck? If I could just get one person to say yes, that would be
Yes,
great.
I can see it. I
Awesome.
got it.
All right.
There.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much, and hearty handshake and virtual high fives to Rebecca for allowing us to come in and talk with you this morning. Typically we do these in person, but of course with COVID, everything is virtual. So there's always going to be those virtual birds on the wire, and we do appreciate your patience as we all, try to get through these. But it's our pleasure to be with you again this morning on behalf of the United States Census Bureau. My name again is Susan Licata, and I'm the media specialist for the US Census Bureau Philadelphia region. And the region includes 8 states and Washington, D.C. And you can see the states listed there by my photo. And as journalists and members of the media, I certainly do welcome your partnership and look forward to working with you to share news coming from the Census Bureau, as well as triaging your requests for interviews or coordination with our subject matter experts, or guiding you to find the data tools or resources for your stories. I'm joined today by my colleague, Joe Cortullo, who's a data dissemination specialist from the Communications Directorate, Customer Liaison and Marketing Services Office in our Data Dissemination and Training branch. And I'll give him a formal introduction here in a few minutes, but a few housekeeping items before we get started. So first, if you've not done so already, if you could please take a moment to put your phone or your device on mute, and that will help to reduce any feedback or background noise or echoes. Next, feel free to drop your questions into the chat box at any time during the presentation. We'll take a Q&A session toward the end there. But do note that any questions related to data quality or methodology or pending litigation should be directed to our public information office at pio@census.gov, and that is listed there on the slide deck. And if you have data specific questions or to arrange a data training, you can see the email there, census.askdata@census.gov, or simply call 1-844-ASKDATA, and we would be happy to present trainings to you as well. And that can be for your newsrooms in particular as well. Move on to the next slide here. So as you know, and I want to give you a little bit of a high level view of the Census Bureau. So we are officially the Bureau of the Census, and the Census Bureau is the principal agency of the US federal statistical system, and we're responsible for producing data about the American people and economy. Now, the Census Bureau is part of the United States Department of Commerce, and its director is appointed by the President of the United States. We collect the data, we deliver the data, but we do not opine about the data nor specifics and their impact. So that's important to know, especially as journalists. Oftentimes we'll get a interview question and say, what do you think about XYZ data and its impact in our community? And that's just not a question we can answer. We don't opine. We deliver that data. We do collect it, we compile it, and we deliver it. On the slide that you're looking at right now, you can see that the Census Bureau is divided into regions. So as I mentioned earlier, we're part of the Philadelphia Regional Census Center, and we are shaded in green, those states there. And then you can see the other 5 regions across the country and what states are included there. Okay, so what we will learn today is you'll have that introduction to the Census Bureau and our Census Bureau newsroom. You will learn how to submit interview requests, how to cite the Census Bureau, and the data and data tools that Joe is going to show you. And some of those data products and tools include Census Quick Facts, the American Community Survey, data profiles, and narrative profiles. And those are two very exciting tools that Joe will introduce you to, because they're going to help you write stories so much more efficiently and effectively. Finally, we'll tell you and show you how to connect with the Census Bureau and stay connected and stay up to date. And finally, we will do a Q&A session. Okay, so a little bit about the Census Bureau. So the Census Bureau is the federal government's largest statistical agency, and we're dedicated to providing current facts and figures about America's people and the economy. And federal law protects the confidentiality of all of the information that the Census Bureau collects, whether that was our just recent 2020 decennial census or the over 130 other surveys that the Census Bureau conducts each year. So with respect to censuses, we of course conduct the decennial census held every 10 years. And the decennial census counts all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the island areas. And as you know, the results of the decennial census determine the number of seats for each state in the US House of Representatives, as well as that data is used to draw congressional and state legislative districts, as well as to distribute over $675 billion in federal funding every year for the next 10 years. So that's why it was so critically important that we ensured everybody was counted last year during the decennial census. Now, next is the economic census, which measures the nation's economy every 5 years. And that helps to provide vital statistics for virtually every industry and geographical area in the country. So it's pretty big in itself. Next, the Council of Governments provides comprehensive data about the nearly 90,000 state and local governments in our nation every 5 years. And then some of our larger surveys, as I mentioned, we have over 130, but here are some of our larger. The American Community Survey, which Joe will touch upon, is an ongoing survey that shows what the US population looks like and how it lives. And the ACS, as we call it, helps communities decide where to target their services and resources. The ACS is the second largest survey that the Census Bureau conducts. And again, that is every 5 years. And then our demographic surveys that measure income, poverty, education, health insurance coverage, housing quality, crime victimization, computer usage, and many, many other subjects. We also have our economic surveys, which are conducted monthly, quarterly, and annually. And these cover selected sectors of the nation's economy, and they supplement the economic census with more frequent information about the dynamic economy. And these surveys yield more than 400 annual economic reports, including principal economic indicators. I know it's a lot, isn't it? Sounds like a lot. Then we have our sponsored surveys, which are demographic and economic surveys that we conduct for other government agencies. And those include the Current Population Survey, the National Health Interview Survey, and the National Survey of College Graduates. We also have our Small Business Pulse Survey, which provides detailed information on the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on small businesses. And that is information that can be very, very useful for you all as you look to include your local information surrounding COVID-19 for your articles. We also have a COVID-19 data hub. It is not part of today's presentation, but we're happy to send you that link. It's very easy to find and incredibly useful. Let me go down to the next slide. Okay, so why census data? And as many of you mentioned and what you hope to gain, you know that census data really helps communities depend on information from the American Community Survey, the decennial census, and all of our other surveys to help decide where schools, highways, hospitals, and other important services are needed. And that data collected through all of our surveys help to determine, again, how to distribute, how our local governments will distribute more than that $675 billion of federal funding every year for the next 10 years. You know, data equals the dollars. So the message that we were saying throughout the decennial census was, you know, the money doesn't follow the need, the money follows the count. And that is so important to understand, because that data from the 2020 decennial census helped to inform and impact our communities every year. Census data, whether it's decennial or any of those surveys I mentioned, is private and confidential and never at any time can any one individual, organization, or business ever be identified. So we do not share any personal identifying information. Only the data is extracted, and that is protected by law. And of course, the Census Bureau is nonpartisan, and conducting the decennial census in itself is a constitutional mandate. So that's a bit about the agency. So let me now go live to the Census Bureau newsroom, and I'll flip my screen and just making sure you can all see census.gov. If I can have one person just say yes, that you can see that, that would be helpful.
Yes.
We can see it.
Thank you. So we're starting here at census.gov. And if we look at the menu bar at the top, we'll go to information for, and we're going to click on media. And this is going to take us straight to the Census Bureau's newsroom. And from here, I want to direct your attention to our left side menu. And you can see there's a variety of tabs you can click, and we're going to go through those briefly. So we're going to start with our newsroom, of course, and this is how to reach our headquarters, right? So our public information offices, whether it's news media or non-media, all of the service that we provide, training that we have. I'm going to get to embargoed releases in a moment. I am your regional liaison. So at the end, you will have all of my contact information. As well, we will be sharing this slide deck with you. So I urge you to stay connected with me, and I'd love to add you to my mailing list so that you have firsthand information that is coming out of the Census Bureau. I send something out about once a week. I don't spam you. But that would be any stats for stories, facts and features, or any press releases or invitations to press conferences that we may have coming. So I do send those out. I'd love to add you to my list. Outside of that, like I say, make that connection with me, and I will triage your inquiry to ensure that it gets to our headquarters. And the reason why we do that is because we may need a subject matter expert for your question, or it may simply be something that I can speak to. So please do route that interview request or that media request to me first, and then we'll send it up to our public information office. So let's start with our facts for features. And facts for features is a collection of statistics from the Census Bureau's demographic and economic subject areas. And those pertain to holidays, anniversaries, or observances on topics in the news. And the data here is intended to assist you, our journalists, with your writing of feature stories, and really help to strengthen and deepen the facts that you're going to embed into your stories. So you can see that those facts for features, right now we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. If I click on that, you'll see that you have the background, you have some visualizations and statistics, you'll see source information and the link, you'll have additional statistical information that you can share and extract. We have related content that goes along with it. We have our, methodologies and disclaimers. It really is chock full of information depending on what you are writing about, or if you need an idea of what to write about. Sometimes you might have writer's block. So feel free to look up those facts for features. We do keep the facts for features archived as well. And you can see we go back a number of years, and then you can simply just click on the archive as well. And you can sort and whittle those by topic as well as by year. We also have our press releases. So of course, our most recent press releases are always at the top. Happens to be this week, our census paid temporary workers. And prior to that was our new community resilience estimates on data equity. So again, if we look at that, chock full of information for you, complete with links. So you are free to click on those links, extract the data. You can see we also disclaim if there's a news release associated with the product. This is just a tip sheet on this one. Sometimes they go into a little more detail. Let me see, where was one? I think the manufacturing day had a little more detail to it. So it gives you some background, and you can see that we created a manufacturing week homepage, which includes stats and data products. You can see some related stories. You can see the infographics. You can see webinars if you want to learn a little bit more about it. So it really does help you write a pretty robust article if you were writing about manufacturing in this case. I'll next direct your attention to our press kits, which are just wonderful kits full of background material that you need and rely upon many times to write your stories on major releases and the events. And those include a wide range of resources, including archive webcasts, reports, our ranking tables, translations, fact sheets, and such. And we do include those in Spanish as well as English. So I encourage you to check those out. And again, same, we do keep a full library of our press kits. You can see those by year, or you can simply go to our archive and feel free to pull and take what you need. I'm going to pull your attention right now to the redistricting data files press kit. Since it's so timely, this has been very helpful. Redistricting data was recently released in its easy to use format. And if you're unaware, that redistricting data is what is reflected from the 2020 decennial census data gathering, data collection. So you can see all of the information here about the program. Here are the summary files. We have a lot of different tables. Again, Joe's going to go into a little bit more detail with those ease of use toolkits. You can see the tools. You can see the news products that are related to it. So I really just love our press kits. They're so comprehensive, and boy, oh boy, if you ever want to get lost in the data, and I'll say it's easy to use and easy to find and easy to extract, this would be the place to do it, is through our press kits. We next have a full array of stats for stories, and stats for stories provides those links to timely story ideas, highlighting newsworthy statistics that relate to our current events, observances, holidays, and anniversaries, much like the facts for features. They do help you in your story mining, as well as help to produce content for your varied audiences. You can see that our facts for features, again, are similar. And right now we have what, Global Diversity Awareness Month. So same thing, everything is just a click away, whether it's the background, the infographics, the visualizations, the tables, the charts. This one has an interactive gallery, which has been recently released on racial and ethnic diversity in the US. There's a little web tutorial that goes along with it. So we don't just give you the gallery and say, figure it out. We give you the gallery and say, now here's a little tutorial so that you understand it and you can navigate through it. So it's pretty cool. I really like these, and I know I spent last week when this came out, the interactive gallery came out, I did a couple of those tutorials, and it really is easy to use. So whether you're a novice data user or you're pretty darn experienced, you know, all of our data tools and products really help to make life easier. You will rarely be lost, and certainly after Joe talks, you're going to be so much more well versed. But again, we have more stats to go along with all of our stories. Here's that Census Academy, which gives you the how-to videos. So very, very helpful. We don't want anybody lost. Okay, I'm going to go back to our newsroom homepage here. And I want to direct your attention to the media guide for covering the Census Bureau. So again, you'll see the statistical programs that we have. And when you click on those programs that I mentioned earlier, so here's decennial, here's the ACS, here's the demographic surveys, you'll be able to get a deep dive into what those statistical programs are. And more importantly, that you're going to the right program to find the information that you need. So again, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of products, there's a lot of tools, but we really want you to know and understand where to find that particular data. Okay, so you can see we scroll through there and you'll see the corresponding resources as well. Okay, so I'm going to go right back over to the newsroom. And I want to next direct your attention to embargoed releases. Now, when I click on the embargoed release page, you'll see that our embargoed site is limited to folks who are approved for embargo access, and you must need to be representing media outlets, as all of you are, and that your day job is to give your chief attention to gathering and reporting news. So you must either be employed or represent a news outlet that regularly publishes or broadcasts a substantial volume of news material for public consumption. It's important to note that embargo access is granted on an individual basis only. So if you gain your embargo access, you cannot share that amongst your colleagues in the newsroom. As well, if you move to another news organization, you must reapply for your embargoed access with that new outlet. It does not follow you to your next place of employment. Okay, so I want to go back to our newsroom here. Okay, and I'm going to come back over to my screen of how to cite the Census Bureau in your articles. So any of that content that I just showed you and anything that you find on census.gov is public information. That is for you, the American public, right? So we just ask that as you pull that information, and it really is grab and go, you can highlight, copy, paste right into your articles. Any content, any visualizations, any graphics, any charts and tables, any of the information Joe will show you that you can download and extract and create into a table form or graph form, that's yours. Okay, you do not need additional permission. We just ask that you cite the Census Bureau, at minimum, source US Census Bureau. At maximum, just like it shows on the screen here, that you can show the name of the data tool, whether that was American Community Survey or data.census.gov, what the document or table was, the URL, and the date you accessed the information. Next, interview requests. We are thrilled, happy, and welcome your request for interviews. We will ask you just a few simple questions: your name, what outlet you represent, your contact information. If you are on a deadline, and we do pay close attention to that, because we understand, you may need it now and for 6 o'clock news break. So we will literally drop everything and help you, help to meet your deadline. But more importantly, because sometimes it's not just a straightforward response to a question, and we will need to gather whether it's a subject matter expert, maybe it's a data dissemination specialist, maybe we have to gather the right data for your particular question, especially if it's hyper local. We may need to look at a couple of different data sources or data surveys. So it's not just a yes, no. So that's why we certainly ask, what is your deadline? Well, and let me back up a moment too about the question. It's important to note sometimes journalists have asked us or made comments, and rather than asking a question. So the request would come in as more of a comment. So and so mentioned that they felt, fill in the blank. What do you think about that? And again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't opine. So I'm not really going to think anything. We will need your inquiry in the form of a question so we can provide you with a response. Um, Moving on, it's good to note, and we need to note if it's live, recorded, or part of a story with other contributors. We have several 100,000 partner organizations across the United States, whether those are nonprofit organizations, other businesses, or our state data centers. So we work very closely with our state data centers. And sometimes we may ask, if you've not already, to reach out to them as well, because they may have data that will help your story. They may also be able to opine, whereas we do not. So we do ask if you have other contributors. And again, that general line of questions and your topic. So the more specific you can get, the better, rather than just, oh, I want to talk about redistricting data. It's like, okay, well, let's get a little more specific about that redistricting data. So we can really provide you a good, solid answer and give you a lot of depth to your response. We also have visualizations available for you, and you can see, and here's that link here, B-roll as well as still photos that go along with the 2020 decennial census. So that's a whole lot about the newsroom. It's my pleasure now to introduce my colleague, Joe Cortullo, data dissemination specialist. And Joe has been employed by the Census Bureau since the late 20th century, having held positions as a geographic specialist, survey statistician, program coordinator, and area manager. And currently as a data dissemination specialist, Joe promotes the use of census data to anybody with an interest or a need to work with this valuable information, including media, community organizations, municipal officials, chambers of commerce, librarians, students, and entrepreneurs, and many, many more. Joe's available for complimentary presentations and hands-on data workshops. He's going to give you the highlights today, but we certainly can coordinate a training again, whether that's one-on-one or for your newsroom, to really go in depth and even do some case studies. Joe's a Philadelphia native. He received his BA in political science from Rutgers University and an MA in sociology from Temple University. He shares his knowledge of census history and data tools by teaching sociology at a local community college. So with that said, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to my colleague, Joe Cortullo.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to make sure that my audio is good. So can someone acknowledge that you hear me?
I
Yes,
can
I
hear
can
you
hear
loud.
you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. Well, then let me go ahead and get ready and share my screen. Okay. And do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me just blow it up here for you. And I've already been introduced. Susan, thank you very much for the introduction. I'll remind you now that I'm available to assist anyone with data questions, and I'll also remind you again at the end of the presentation and give you my contact information. Susan covered a little bit of this already about what is the Census Bureau and the mission statement of the Census Bureau. It's to be the preeminent collector and provider of data about not only the people, but the economy of the United States. And I know Susan also mentioned that we are part of the Department of Commerce. Our goal is to collect and produce the best mix of data in a timely, relevant, quality way and at a minimum amount of cost to the taxpayers. Now, everyone hears and thinks about the census, and usually when we say the census like that, we're talking about the census that's conducted once every 10 years. we refer to it as the decennial census. And the reason that we conduct the decennial census every 10 years is that way back, this was from 1787 in the Constitution. The founding fathers put this clause in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, saying that the representatives and taxes, direct taxes, shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. So, as you know, the more population a state has, the greater voice they have
We lost your audio, Joe.
in the House of Representatives. And it went on to then 3 years after the first meeting, which was a subsequent term of 10 years. So we've been faithful to that. And every 10 years, beginning in 1790, which was 3 years after this, the Constitution, and every 10 years after that, we've been conducting a census. And we just completed the 24th census of the United States in 2020. A little bit more about the decennial census. It's required by law. Susan already mentioned that. You saw that it's in the Constitution, and it's also part of Title 13 of the United States Code. I mentioned that it's every 10 years, always the year that ends in zero, and it's a snapshot of a point in time. Since 1920, that point in time has been April the 1st of the year that ends in zero. So the 2020 census, which we just completed, was a snapshot of what the nation looked like on April the 1st of 2020. That is the reference day. We know that it's used to reapportion the House of Representatives. There's been some shifting of representatives based upon the 2020 population. Some states have gained, some states have lost. Texas was the only state that gained 2 seats. A few states gained one, and a few states lost. Many stayed the same. It's also used to distribute the $675 billion through 300 federal programs. Just a couple of those federal programs off the top of my head would be the food stamp program, the school lunch program, the Section 8 housing program. So the more people a particular geography has, the more money they get. That's a quick and easy way to put it. And Susan mentioned the confidentiality of the census. The names are disassociated from the data. So the 2020 data that's coming out, or started to come out now, there's no name attached to it. It's all about the statistics for specific geographies. However, after 72 years, the National Archives releases that to the public. So currently, if you were a genealogist doing research on your great aunt or great great grandparent, you can go back to the 1940 census and prior. And if you have the person's name and where they lived, you could see who they were living with at the time, what was the education of each person, if every who was working, where each person was born. Lots of different social and demographic questions were asked on the earlier censuses. Next year, not actually less than a year now, almost 6 months from now, the 1950 census will be released because that will be 72 years since that has passed. It'll be released by the National Archives, and the genealogists are waiting for that very anxiously. So, just wanted to point that out to you about all about the decennial census, which, as you know, is every 10 years. But because it was conducted only once every 10 years, there was a problem with it. And the problem was that the data became outdated. For example, in 1998, if you needed data about Wilmington, Delaware, you would be looking at census data from 1990, already 8 years old. Wilmington probably had changed a lot in those 8 years. So that wouldn't really be relevant and timely. So there was a solution for that, and that solution is called the American Community Survey, which is an ongoing survey collecting data all the time, not just every 10 years, but every year. And it provides us with a lot of information. So, a lot of the data that we're going to be looking at is going to be coming from the American Community Survey. A little bit more about the American Community Survey. It's a survey, it's a sample. It's not like the census where every housing unit in the United States is accounted for. It's a sample of 3.5 million addresses a year. and it covers lots of topics. We'll take a look at them in a minute. The other good thing about the American Community Survey, it does give us data all the way down to the neighborhood level. So we could start at the nation, the states, the counties, the municipalities, in some cases the metro areas, all the way down to small areas like census tracts and block groups. For large populations, and by the word large here, I mean for populations with 65,000 people or more, for example, Baltimore City, you can get data for the previous year. So currently, the current 1 year data, we call it, which would be the data for the previous year, is available for 2019. And the smaller populations with less than 65,000 people a year, you can get data every year, but it's for a 5 year period. So the current 5 year estimates for smaller populations, the data was collected from 2014 through 2019. Rather, I'm sorry, 2015 through 2019, that 5 year period. So and you really should not compare the two. I just want to point that out. So if you're a data user that's comparing a county that has a large population to the municipalities within the county that have a smaller population, you should stick to the 5 year estimate for everything, even the large population, because you want to be consistent and show data that was collected during the same time period. It might be a little bit confusing. I'm open for questions about that at the end or later if you have any of those. Now, we've been talking about the census, and when I say census here, I mean the decennial census, and we're also talking about the ACS. So there's a difference between the two. You know that the census is a count of every household in the United States, or the people in every household in the United States, while ACS, it takes 3.5 million households in the United States, which is approximately 2.5% of the households in the United States each year, and collects data on those households. It's a sample. So because it's a sample, when we look at the data, we can't be exact that those 3.5 million households truly represent the nation as a whole. So because it's a sample, we provide you with a margin of error. So we'll look at that when we look at the tables in a minute. But the ACS produces sample estimates rather. The census produces the official count. Now the big advantage of the ACS, it collects detailed social, economic, housing, and demographic information. For example, income. That question is on the ACS. That's not on the census. Or educational attainment. That question is on the ACS. That's not on the census. So the ACS collects a lot more information than the census, much more detailed. The focus of the ACS is to provide population and housing characteristics of the population, whereas the census, as we know, is all about totals for population and housing. And we also know that new data is collected and produced every year for the ACS, but only every 10 years for the census. And finally, for the ACS, we're looking at data that was collected over a period of time. That might be 1 year, or it might be a 5 year period, depending on the size of the geography. Whereas for the census, we're looking at data that was collected during a point in time. Again, that point in time for the 2020 census was April the 1st. I just want to do a sound check to make sure everyone is still hearing me before I go on. Are we? Is everyone still hearing
Yep,
me?
we're all
Okay.
here, and actually now is probably. Does anyone have any questions
Okay.
for Joe while we're here? All right, looks like take it away, Joe.
Okay. Okay. So again, we're comparing the decennial census to the ACS. Now, what does the decennial census collect? The 2020 census that we encouraged everyone to fill out. It does not collect a lot of information. It collects the name and age of each person living in the household, whether or not they were Hispanic, their race, out of 5 different race categories, their relationship to the head of the household, whether that be a daughter or a spouse or whatever, and the sex or gender of each person. That in this case, it's male or female. And one other question the decennial census asks about the housing unit: is it owned or rented? But that's it. The decennial census does not collect a lot of information. If you filled it out recently, which would have been in the past year, these are the only questions that were asked in the decennial census. But when we look at the American Community Survey, we see a wealth of about 40 different topics that are collected. And this data is available, as I said, each year. So you see the demographic section in the middle. That's what's asked in the 2020 census or the decennial census. But all of the other topics are asked in the American Community Survey. For example, ancestry. A person is asked their ancestry has always been on the American Community Survey since its inception in 2005. Questions about disability and language spoken in the home, marital status, all those questions, all those topics rather that you see on the left, they're questions that are asked in the American Community Survey that gather social information about the population. And when I say the population, again, I mean from the nation all the way down to the census tract, which is kind of like the neighborhood. Then we see the economic section that's collected in the American Community Survey. This is where income would be collected, whether or not people work. And if they work, what is their industry? What is their occupation? Does the household collect food stamps? How long does it take for each person that goes to work? How long does it take for them to get to work? That is another question on the American Community Survey. And then finally, when we go over to look at the housing section, it's not only questions about the population, it's also sections about the housing. So what type of heating fuel is used? So we take an area like Gaithersburg, just off the top of my head, what percentage of homes in Gaithersburg use gas? What percentage use electric for heating? What maybe there's even some that use coal or wood. So that's another question in the American Community Survey. Whether or not the housing unit is occupied, what kind of plumbing, kitchen facilities does it have? When was the house built? So if you wanted to see how many homes in say Garrett County were built prior to 1930. If you were a contractor and you were into old homes, you could find that information out from the American Community Survey. So all of this information is collected in the American Community Survey, and this is really where you want to go to get the data for the topics that you may be looking for. The census is great. It's the most up-to-date thing right now that we have, the 2020 census. It's great as far as those demographic characteristics you see in the middle and the counts for different geographies, but it doesn't collect all of this other information. So how does the ACS work? Well, this is how the ACS works in a very similar fashion in the way that the 2020 census worked. Postcards or letters are mailed to the selected addresses for the ACS. Remember, ACS is selected addresses. Decennial census was every address. But postcards or letters are mailed to the selected addresses in the ACS, and they're asked to go online to complete the survey. Approximately 45–50% of the households do that. And one of the reasons that that's a pretty high percentage is because the ACS, just like the decennial census, is required by law. And it does say that on there, your responses are required by law. So we really don't enforce that, but we do tell people that that the responses are required by law. For those households that don't complete the questionnaire online, after a couple reminders, maybe a couple letters, reminder postcards, they're sent the form to complete the ACS, the actual paper form. So there's lots of reasons why households may not complete the survey online. They may not have access to the internet. They may be people in their over 80, 85. They've never touched a laptop or a computer in their life. The area where they live may not access the internet as well. So we send paper questionnaires to those households to complete the survey. And then for those households that still don't complete the survey, we send a person out to collect the data. So between these three different forms of data collection, we get about 90%, 95% response rate for those selected addresses. And because that's a really high response rate for a survey, that makes us confident that the data is accurate. I will provide these slides and when we're finished here, and if you want to look at what the American Community Survey looks like, you'll have the opportunity to do that looking at a sample questionnaire. So I've mentioned that the data is available from the nation all the way down to the neighborhood. But there's lots of other geographies that you may be interested in that you can get ACS data for, or decennial data for that matter. But for example, if you're writing about a specific congressional district, maybe at the time prior to an election, you want to take a look at what is the demographic makeup of a congressional district. You can get ACS data for that. So if you say you're interested in income or the education level of a specific congressional district, you can get that. You can get data for, as well as the state legislative districts. You can get data for the metro area. So I've used Baltimore as an example of the Baltimore metro area, which includes the surrounding counties. You can get data for that as well. So not only Baltimore, and that would be combined together. You don't have to add anything together. And you can get data at the zip code level. We call it the zip code tabulation area. So all of these geographies, and this is not totally inclusive, but all of these geographies you can get data for. And as we get down to the smaller geographies, you can see that a census tract is approximately 4,000 people. So in the city of Baltimore, if you want to get data, you don't have to just get data for the city. You can get it for a very specific area of the city, as well as even a smaller geography. We call that the block group. The bottom one there, census blocks, that's a really small area, almost like a city block. The only data that's released at that level is the decennial data, but everything else you can get the American Community Survey data for. So I plan on showing you 3 data tools. I talked in detail already about the ACS, so I plan on showing you 3 data tools that you could use, and most of them have some additional features like mapping and things like that that I want to show you. So I'm going to go over to the website if you give me a minute here. And I also want to say that I'm including in this how to get to each of these data tools. So you don't have to worry about writing it down. I'll include this to you and I'll provide this to the whole organization. So give me a minute. I want to go over to the website for the first data tool I want to show you, which is called QuickFacts. And it's easy to get to. It's simple. It's just www.census.gov/QuickFacts. And when I type that in, I get a lot of information, or we could say quick facts about the United States, the nation as a whole, right? We have population data and data about age and sex, basic demographic information, race and Hispanic origin information. Now, right now, we're looking at the United States. So, for example, the percentage of foreign-born persons in the United States, and this would be from the ACS 5-year data, 2019 5-year data. We know that because it gives those years there. But the 14% of the nation was born outside of the nation. Information about housing units and median gross rent. Lots of data that you may be able to use depending on what you're writing on and whatever your topic is. Information about computers and internet use. So this is not real detailed. For example, the data on education just gives us whether or not the percentage of the population that's a high school graduate and has a bachelor's degree. But you can get much more detailed information when we go into the other data tools. This is quick facts, so it has a lot of quick facts. So I'm showing you the United States percent in poverty, 11.4. But you can add up to 6 geographies or 5 more geographies. So in a total of 6 geographies here. So let us put in Delaware just to show you. And we'll take the state of Delaware. That's our second geography. Now we have all those same quick facts about Delaware. And let's go further and put in a Howard County, Maryland, for example. And we'll take that and we'll have that. So if you were comparing geography, cities, or several counties in the state or states amongst each other, you can use quick facts to do that and get a quick comparison of what they look like. Let's take another county, Baltimore County. So we can have 6 counties. You can X these out. For example, no longer you have an interest in the U.S. data, so you can X these out and you can add more. You can have up to 6. So let's take a quick look at the comparison between these two counties. We could see Baltimore County's almost quadruple population in size of Howard County. We can see a little bit of a difference in Hispanic or Latino percent in terms of percentage. A little bit of a difference, about 30%, and Howard being about 20%. But there's a lot more data in here. There's the number of veterans, the percentage of foreign born, and remember the percentage of foreign born in the U.S. was, I think it was 13.4. So it looks like Howard County tends to have a higher percentage of foreign born than the nation. And information about housing, computer and internet use, etc. So this is quick facts. It has maybe approximately 50 facts or so about the specific geography that you're looking for. You can use that. You can use this for cities as well. The only caveat for quick facts is right here. The population has to be 5,000 people or more. But you can do more with quick facts. You can map the data. So let's turn this into a map instead of a table. We'll say map, and it just wants us to click on any one of these geographies. I'm going to say map Baltimore County. Now we're going to get a map of the state with, let's see, we have a legend down the bottom. Let's let that load. And move this in. Okay, we can see the legend down the bottom. Maybe if I make it a little smaller. So this is total population we're looking at. One quick fact that we're looking at right here, total population as of 2019. So you can see the areas that have a lesser population are lighter. This is a thematic map, meaning that the darker the color, the more the population is. And here is the legend down the bottom. But that's total population. You can map any fact. So since we mentioned the percentage of Black or African American when we were looking at that, now we're mapping the percentage of Black or African American, not the total population. And what jumps out right away to me is that way out here, Garrett County, there's a very small percentage of African Americans. But when we get into the Baltimore and the metro area, and even down in the area down here in the southern part, we have a much higher percentage of African Americans. So that's another thing that you can do with quick facts. So you can cut you can cut this map out and paste it, and show it. And showing it in a map this way is a lot easier than looking at a table and having to look at every county. And there's more that you can do with quick facts, though. You can turn this data into a chart. So this will be another way of looking at the data. This is, again, we're still looking at Black or African American percent. And we could see that, well, Baltimore County is at the very top because that was the county that I happened to be using as a example. But then we have, and Howard is also at the very top because that was one of the ones I had highlighted. But then we have the counties in Maryland in alphabetical order in terms of their Black or African American percent alone. These would be people that identify as being only Black or African American. And you can see when you put the cursor on each bar, you could see the actual percentage. So Allegheny County, very small percentage, or I don't know, very small relative, I guess, but small relative to Baltimore, 8.3%, and Baltimore City, 62.7%. Charles County, we saw those counties that are in the southern part, and Prince George's County also has a high percentage of African Americans. So it will give you all the counties in Maryland in a bar graph. And then finally, one other feature of quick facts is that you can not only look at the data on a table, a map, or a chart, as you see these 3 buttons in the top right, but you could look at it as all 3 of those at once. So we're looking at the data for Harford County because that's the one I picked, as well as uh, this happens to be persons in poverty, as well as the poverty persons in poverty for all the counties in a map. And you can also see the same data in the bar graph. This is all on one screen. So if you wanted to share the screen, you just go here to more and you can print, you can take the data that's in a table, put it in a CSV file. You can email the link and it will bring this up to whoever you email it to, embed it in another website and share it on Twitter and Facebook. So Quick Facts doesn't give you a lot of facts. It gives about 50 facts. Some of it's from the decennial census. Some of it is from the American Community Survey. There's also a pop estimates program that we have. Some of it's from that, but you can get the data that if this is the data that you need. For example, if I'm highlighting persons over 65. If that's the data that you need, if you're doing a story or on seniors, you can do something like this, create this map very easily in Quick Facts. Okay, so that is the first data tool that I wanted to show you. Uh, the next one is, let me go back to the slides here. The ACS narrative profiles. Again, don't write this down because I'm going to provide the steps on how to get to it. But I'm going to go to here. I have it. I have an easy link ready to go. But you can see as I said, I'm going to provide you the steps how to get that. Now, when we use the word narrative here, we mean it's written out. So I think this would probably be the feature that reporters would most likely want to go to. As Susan said, I don't know what word she used, grab and go, I think it was. You can grab and go the data. You don't even have to write it out. A lot of it will be written out for you. So let me show you how to use Quick Facts. Uh, we have to select the geography to begin. So we can do any one of these geographies, including the small area like the census tract, zip code area, metro area, county subdivision, which would be in some states it's a township, in other states it's a district. The Census Bureau uses the word place for incorporated places. So I know states use these words differently. That could be a city, a borough, in some cases, in some states, even a town is considered an incorporated place. So let's do a narrative profile for a place. And we'll pick our state. This time we'll go into Delaware and we'll click our place. So these will be all the incorporated places, or rather all the places I should say in Delaware, both incorporated and recognized by the census. That's what the word CDP means, census designated place. But I'm interested in Dover City. So I'm going to click on that. So I'm doing a narrative profile of a place in Delaware, and that place is Dover City. I'm going to get that narrative profile. It takes a minute or so to load. And here we get a narrative profile showing data for Dover City, Delaware. This is where we say grab and go. Susan uses the word grab and go. For example, if you needed the information about households and families in Dover, this would be something that you can get right away. You don't have to necessarily look at a table. For example, married couples make up 30% of the households in Dover, etc., while cohabitating households make up 8%, etc., etc. But there's a lot more than households and families in here. And you see the data also in a bar graph, different types of families in a bar graph here. Marital status in Dover. So if you were interested in, say, writing an article for Singles magazine or something like that, and a local article, this would be good data to have. Percentage of people that are married or never married, etc. And then information about grandparents that take care of grandchildren, nativity and foreign born. So if you were doing some kind of work with the population of Dover and you wanted to know the percentage of foreign born, you can just grab this here. just like this, cut and paste this out. You don't even have to bother writing it. And you can see approximately 8.3% of Dover city residents were foreign born. Almost half of them were naturalized, etc. And then region of birth, language spoken in the home. Again, this is the narrative profile. So we could see that 10% spoke a language other than English in the home. Spanish was spoken by about 4%. Geographic mobility, have they moved recently? Have they moved within the past year? So uh, almost 76% of Dover residents have not moved in the past year. And that for those that did move, you could see where they move from a different state, a different county within files. So a little bit more detail, high school diploma. It's this would be for people 25 years and older. So the percentage of uh, Dover residents that have a bachelor's degree that are 25 and older, 15%, and almost 12% with a graduate degree. There's a little bit of data on disability. 16.2% of the population reported a disability. And we do go further in detail. Is that a hearing disability, a vision disability, or some other kind of disability? In the it's not presented here, but we do get more detail from that American Community Survey. Information about work, information about the different industries in Dover, and usually we see well, we have here educational services. Many of the geographies that I look at, that's the uh, category that has the most industry, and also retail trade usually has the most. General occupations, and I mentioned about commuting to work. The ACS collects data on commuting to work. How did they get to work? And how long does it usually take the normal Dover resident that works to go to work? And here we can answer about almost 22 minutes. The US average is somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes, changes from year to year. Income data for Dover, again, you can also grab this in a table format if you wanted to do that. And income sources, you're doing something on interested in the amount of Social Security income coming into Dover, or something like that. Participation in government programs and poverty rates, and getting down to health insurance, percentage with health insurance. And then at the end, we usually provide a population pyramid, which is good. It's you probably have seen these before. I often see these in textbooks too. It shows the percentage of both males and females at each age group at every 5 year interval. So Dover has a bump here in the 20 to 24-year-old categories. I suspect that has to do with students. And then other information about race and Hispanic origin, types of housing, whether or not the housing is occupied, the type of fuel, all this information is about Dover. So you can do this about for any geography. This does not have a limit of 5,000 people. You can do this for any geography as long as it's one of the geographies that we mentioned, which are these. So you can even take this for a small area. If you know the census tracts in Dover, say in the southeast corner of Dover, hypothetically census tract 101, you can look at the data for census tract 101. So this is very helpful to reporters because of the way the data is provided. I'm going to switch now and talk about another ACS data product, the data profiles. And again, you'll have the steps on how to get there as well. But if you want really much more detailed data about a specific area, and we'll continue to use Dover as our example, we look at a data profile. However, you notice that it's not as broad in the geography types. You can't get the zip code data, you can't get the census tract data. But you can get a lot of information about a specific geography. There's 4 different data profiles. So you continuing using Dover as our example, we'll look at these and see, what does the data profile give you that you might be able to use. Again, we're going to select Dover. And we're going to get links to 4 different profiles. Remember the categories of ACS data: social, economic, housing, and demographic? Well, you can get a profile specifically based on those topics. For example, let's look at the economic characteristics. Again, this is strictly the city of Dover. So we're going to get a lot of data about Dover in terms of the economic characteristics, starting with population of people uh, 16 years and over. Let me make sure I got this right. That does something doesn't feel right here. Okay, Delaware, Dover City. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think that's something's taking me to the wrong place because I'm pretty sure that that's much higher population than Dover has. 2019 ACS 5 years. Oh, no, it's giving me. I see. Here's Dover. I'm sorry. It provides the state as well. I forgot about that. Let's go over to Dover. So okay, total households in Dover. Here we go. This is Dover from this point on. You can get this information. For example, how many households? We looked at this. How are the people, percentage of people, cohabitating and married? Here's the actual number and the percent. So if we wanted to look at the percentage cohabitating in Dover, we said earlier that it's 8.4% of the people are cohabitating in Dover, and that would be 1,123 people. Uh, don't know how that's an odd number, but you never know. I guess 3 people could be cohabitating together. Uh, that's just a joke or a time to take a minute for a laugh. But you can see there's continued information about the social characteristics in the in Dover. Uh, Marital status. So you can actually get the numbers here as opposed to getting the percentages earlier. So here, if we wanted to know never married, percentage of Dover never married, there's about 7,000 people in Dover, adults that are 15 and over that have never married, with a margin of error, almost 600. Remember, I mentioned it's a margin of error because this is an estimate. We know it's not an exact. And for anyone interested in statistics, the margin of error is at the 90% confidence interval. So another way of saying that is the Census Bureau is 90% confident that the number of people never married in Dover is 6,960 plus 579, or 6,960 minus 579, margin of error. And so this is the social characteristics in Dover. You can see that there. There's information about fertility for women 15 to 50. And we also have educational attainment. So this gives it a much more detailed breakdown than we looked at earlier. Population 25 and older in Dover is 2,200. But then we could see, if we wanted to look at the actual numbers of people with a bachelor's degree, 25 and over, 3,351, with the margin of error. Information about veterans, disability, and where people lived 1 year ago. Have they moved? Has there been a lot of movement? Place of birth, born in the United States and in where they live, or a different state, etc. Lots of different information about the social characteristics of. I don't know if you use the word, but if I can use the word, it feels like I want to say Doverians. So about the social characteristics of Doverians. And here's where you can get the ancestry or ethnic origin. So you can see that, for example, those that identify as English Americans from England, 2,400 plus or minus 411. And here's another one that's a decent number. Irish Americans, there's about 3,400 in Dover. So that would be his article for St. Patrick's Day, where you can get that information. There's estimated 3,431 Irish Americans in Dover, or 9% of the population. And it goes on and on. So this is just the social characteristics. I want to back up and show you any one of these. Let's pick the demographic characteristics. There's going to be a lot more detail in demographic characteristics like age, broken down. Remember, this is Delaware and this is Dover, so I want to slide over again. Demographic characteristics, race, percentage of the different racial groups. For American Indians, not so applicable maybe in Delaware, but applicable in Arizona. It's broken down into tribal group. Asians are broken down into the major Asian categories. Then we also collect data, very small in Dover, for Native Hawaiians and people that identify as more than one race or race alone, and whether or not people identify as Hispanic. That's regardless of race, because the Census Bureau has two different questions on the ACS and the census. One is what is your race, and then the other is are you of Hispanic origin. So this table comes from one of our data tools called data.census.gov. I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to show you some of the features that you can do with data.census.gov. So what I'm going to do is clean this table out, and how I do that is just come up here, click on United States Census. I want to do an advanced search. This time I want to look at census tracts. So I'm going to click on Geography, Census Tracts, back to Maryland, and I want to look at PG County, which I know has a pretty large population. I choose and get a table for any census tract in PG County, but what I wanted to show you here is that you can also get a table for all the census tracts in PG County. Then I can go and look at a topic that I want to have on the table. Specifically, let's say we did happen to look at Black or African Americans in PG County. So why don't we stick with that, and we'll click on topics, race and ethnicity, and Black or African American. And when I made these two clicks, you see down the bottom, they call them chips, filter chips. I filtered out for all census tracts within PG, I say PG County, and also the topic of Black or African American. So when I click search, we're going to get a bunch of different tables that are going to give us data about Black or African American population in PG County. The ones here where we see 2020, that's the most recent 2020 data that was recently released in the past month or so. So why don't we go with that one? So we can click on race here, and we have 2020 data, total population. We're interested in Black or African American. This is every tract in PG County, and you can see there's numerous tracts in PG County. But since we're interested in the Black or African American population, that's the redistricting data. Let's see if we can customize this table and look at this in a map instead of a table. So here's PG County right now, which surrounds DC. Right now, we're looking at the total population, right? Because that's what the first variable was in the table. But I can go and click on population of Black or African American. And here you can see that this, again, a thematic map with the legend over here on the left. The tracts that are the darkest have the highest percentage, and the tracts that are the lightest, like up here in the north part of the area, have the lowest percentage. So I'm very short on time. Wanted to leave some time for a couple questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Susan. I showed you, just to review, after a detailed discussion on the ACS, I showed you quick facts, the narrative profiles, the ACS data profiles, and this is an example from data.census.gov. So Susan, do you want to take the presentation back?
Thank you so much, Joe. It is just always fascinating each time I sit through a data presentation. I learn something new because the samples change and the examples change. But I do want to open it up to you all. If you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat box or go ahead and open your mic. Again, we're unable to take any questions about methodology or pending litigation. We can triage those to our PIO office, but if you have any questions about the data tools or products, please do ask.
Thank you so much for that. Guys, do you have any questions? I feel like we're all kind of processing a lot of that, that data dump. There's a lot of information available on the census website. Any questions for you guys? Oh, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, I was wondering if someone could talk about how the data is anonymized, especially the 2020 census, given the fact that so much other data is sort of out there in the aggregate. It seems like it would be possible, though perhaps not easy, to take census data and merge it with other forms of data and really start to get a sense of individuals. So how does the census kind of protect that data within that 72-year window, given what we now have in 2020?
Thanks for that
Well,
question, Brian.
go ahead, Susan. All right, I'll go first. I can just say that you're correct. You can take data from any source and go on the internet and match it up with other data and figure things out. And it's a violation of privacy. So for the 2020 census, it's been going on for the past 2 or 3 years. There is a process. I can't think of the name. Forgive me for that. But there's a process of moving data around, but at the same time keeping it in balance, so that you can't. It's a way to prevent the data. I guess we could use the word triangulation, taking it from a couple different sources. There's a way to do that. I'd be glad to send you a link to explain everything about that if you wanted to get into how that's done.
Yes, please. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, okay, I will. It's called, it just came to me, differential privacy. So I'll send you lots of information on differential privacy if you have your email address, and then you can read further on that.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you for that question, Brian. We appreciate that. Any other questions out there? And as you can see on my screen, contact information for Joe and I. If you don't have a question right at the moment, feel free to send us an email or call us on the phone. We're happy to help. We are always here for you. And I see there may be a question that came in. Let me see if I can.
On the chat,
oh, go ahead.
You have some people putting their emails in. Any other questions that are out there?
And you bring up a great point, Rebecca, about that chat. If you all would like me to continue to send you information, feel free to drop your email into the chat box and I'll pick those up and add those right in. Like I mentioned, I'm happy to add you to my email list. I will not spam you, but then you'll get those updates. You won't have to go hunting around in the newsroom when they come out. I'll be sure to send those to you.
This is Joe. If I could just add, in normal times, we come out and talk to organizations, show, do presentations and even do trainings and workshops. We're not doing that right now, but if you are interested in a specific webinar for a specific organization, I'm more than willing to help. You can just get in touch with me. We could set something up.
And we do have 2 additional presentations in the queue. Rebecca, thank you so much for allowing us to present 3 to make it a series. I think it's going to be invaluable. Today's session was that high level look at what's out there, and our upcoming sessions will take a little closer look, one at the American Community Survey and the other a little deeper dive into data.census.gov.
Yep. So those are coming up later in October. We also have an internship webinar that I'd love your support in publicizing a little bit more. Everything people or students need to know about applying to journalism internship programs, and that'll be later in October. So please join us for that as well. Thank you so much to Susan and